That would have been good.
Going live.
Alrighty, let's
Now
try.
we're live.
Now let's try.
Yeah. No, it's the waiters were attentive to what their duties were and the customers were there. Now, mind you, this was a very expensive dinner for two,
Mm-hmm.
probably about 15 years ago, and ran us
Right.
over $100.
Wow.
But it was the food was impeccable,
Uh-huh.
the wait staff was impeccable, and not to sound sexist or whatnot, but the only female that I saw in there was the hostess. None of the wait staff they were all male.
Interesting. Yeah. We just had to start it. Apparently, I didn't hit the right button, which is a good thing. The smart guys in the room, not me. But just to reiterate, we're talking about service right now, and one of the class members was talking about the experience he had at a restaurant that was just like amazing. And just to recap here a little bit, we are talking about service today, because for those who are online just joined us. And we're going to look at Mark chapter 10, verses 32 through 45 on these three areas: death coming, request made, and roles reversed. And the main idea is that Jesus gave his life as an ultimate act of service. And we are in session number 8. So those of you online, if you have a lesson book, you can follow along there as well. We're, like I said, Mark chapter 10 today. And we're just talking about what is the best customer service that you have encountered. And we had the one related to the restaurant there. I was thinking about the same question. And we bought a car. It was a Ford Explorer from the Ford dealership in, I think it's Camas or Washougal, one of those two.
Wesley Ford.
Yes, Wesley Ford. And you know, people have good experiences and bad experiences at car places. And I've had both. I've had some that look at me and size me up and say, you can't really afford a car. And they just ignore me. Not at Wesley Ford. The salesman there, I forgot his name. I shouldn't forget his name, but he's a great guy. I mean, he worked with us. He worked with us to get the deal we wanted, exactly the payments I wanted, how I wanted them, and then he found ways to save us money even on top of that. And he periodically sends me emails, and he sends us a Christmas card. So
Wow.
this guy goes above and beyond. You know, he made his sale. Go on to the next person. No, I am going to continue to follow up with these people because these people are worthwhile. That's his mentality. It's like I've never had a car salesman do that before. And so it was a startling thing to have that happen. I keep wondering, what's he going to do next, you know? Send me a birthday present, maybe? But the service I got from that experience just stood out in my mind. Good to see you, David. We're talking about the best customer service you have encountered. So, anybody have one they want to share?
I'm gonna go on the other end because
You can't go on the bad ones. We're not talking about
Okay,
those.
no, not bad ones. But I've been in
Right.
customer service almost my entire
Oh, well, I
professional
understand. Yes,
career.
I have been in that
So-
kind of thing too at times.
So you can do just this simple, easy stuff to make the customer remember you. One of the things that I learned a long time ago, Matthew have one?
Yeah, Matthew.
I do not. Thank you.
Is most of the time now, the customer hands you their name. It's on your credit card, or on your debit card.
Right.
And if you turn around and use that, for one, it kind of shocks them, right? And two, it makes you memorable,
Yeah.
right? So I try to
Yeah.
use that whenever,
Yeah.
not that I'm in that anymore, but
Right. Well, it works other situations too. Like at Winco, they have most of the Winco employees have name things on there.
Yes.
So whenever I'm going through this, I say, "Hi, Barbara. How you doing today?" She'll look at me like, "Well, thank you. Fine." Now, it's like she expects me to say that to her.
yeah.
Yeah. I've had also a real good experience with our Xfinity person. I mean, the guy went above and beyond. I mean, he'd make sure we got the exact phone we wanted, had exact plan and savings in ways that I didn't know I could get. And then he follows up and sends me a text, how's it working for you, and things like that. And so, you know, those kind of experiences stand out in your mind.
Yeah.
it's made me to realize how I can do maybe better sometimes when I come across people like that. I try to take lessons from them in a way, you know. Anyway, but what was it about that experience that stood out to you? In my case, it was probably the persistence of that car salesman at Wesley Ford in Camas, Washougal area, and the fact that he must have an extensive note system or things that he keeps track of stuff to know my name, to know, you know, all the things that he does know about me, because, well, I probably gave him everything I know about me when I bought my car. But the fact that he cares enough to follow up is interesting to me. And the fact that he's persistent about how he does it, it stood out to me. Anything else? Anybody else?
But that's just good customer service.
Well, I
too.
realize that, but
Yeah, I mean, but he's doing it, you know, not only to help himself, but to help each of his
Yeah.
customers.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And the one you related, I'd say personalizing things.
Yes.
That probably stood out to you, right?
Jerry
Yeah.
killed.
What's that?
Jerry killed.
Jerry killed what?
That was the name of the person. Wesley Ford.
Oh, Jerry.
I'm waiting for it. Okay.
Okay, Jerry killed who?
You texted me his name.
How do you spell that last name?
K-I-L-D.
Oh, okay.
What?
I couldn't remember that. Jerry, though. I remember Jerry. Now that you mentioned that. Anyway, so Jerry's a great guy. If you go to Wentworth, was it Wentworth?
Washougal.
Washougal Ford.
Wesley Ford.
Wesley Ford.
Wesley.
Wesley Ford. Look for Jerry. Plug for Jerry. Anyway, so those things stand out to us, don't those? Those are kind of experiences in our life, right? And they're an exciting thing to do that. But we're going to talk about service today also. So, and I think I read the paragraph already, did I?
Most people.
Yes, I did. I read that already, but
Yeah.
you know, I'll read it again just one more time. It says most people are served by someone in a typical day. A waiter brings you a glass of water. A driver allows you into the flow of traffic, though you didn't really have the right of way at that point. How often are we grateful for those acts of service? Do we? By the way, when people let me in, I wave.
Yes.
I wave,
Always.
and I let people in. I expect a wave. Sometimes
And
I
you
don't
don't
get
get
one. But if somebody lets you in, wave. Let them know, right? Anyway, how often are we? Or it says, do we rudely get upset when the waiter doesn't meet our standards? Or do we cut somebody off in traffic, even when we've just been allowed in ahead of our turn? So being grateful for the sacrifice of others should change the way we live. And I think that's a true statement. What do you think?
Truck drivers do it all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
They let you know they appreciate you letting them in.
Yes.
So can it be easy to recognize outstanding service, but often more difficult to express gratitude, don't you think? I think it is. When we do not receive the caliber of service we expect, it's kind of hard then to do that, isn't it? You got to work at it. Well, that person wasn't very attentive to me. I don't think I'm giving much of a tip, you know, or something like that, right?
You know what, Brother Norman? One of the
Yes.
things that stands out with me is when you're having a bad day, you're the individual. You're not being rude,
Right.
but that customer service person recognize you're having a bad day. And
Yes.
they say do some gesture of kindness, you know.
To put you at ease and to
Yeah,
help
yeah,
you
they do
get over that a little bit.
And they don't have to do. They can just be professionally nice, but it's an extra step beyond what they're called to do, and it just makes me feel good.
Yeah. Changes your day.
It
doesn't
does. It really does.
Those things do stand out to us, don't they? Anyway, we're continuing our study where Jesus is in the area, I believe still, of Caesarea Philippi, right up here. He's been doing a lot of teaching in this area, which we talked about before is kind of the pagan area. That's not where rabbis go to normally. Rabbis avoid those areas. Rabbis stay around Jerusalem and stuff like that, right? But Jesus is not your ordinary rabbi. He's going to where the people need the help. You know, he made the comment one time that those that are not sick do not need a physician. You know, so he went to those people that need spiritual
Who knew they were sick.
healing. Yes, exactly. We also, by the way, in our handouts, we also have a timeline. I think I mentioned that earlier too, which comes in very handy. We're not going to necessarily look at that particular thing right at this point. It's just for your own thing. But anyway, Jesus was traveling with his disciples, and he had these experiences here that we're going to talk about. Jesus defined his role as Messiah in a way that ran opposite to what most people's expectations were at that time, and I dare say most people's expectations today, even. It says, on his journey towards Jerusalem, he's leaving the area of Caesarea Philippi, he's going towards Jerusalem now. Jesus focused the conversation on what he expected of them. As we see, he turned their expectations of the kingdom of God upside down. That's very true. We're going to see that in our study now. So let's dive into the first point here. Death coming. Who's got number 1? Okay. We're going to read, it says in these first 3 verses, I want you to notice what Jesus was very concerned about for his followers. Okay? Go ahead and read that for us, Steve.
They were on their way up to Jerusalem, with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. We are going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise.
Now this verse is, like I said, they're traveling back, and to set the stage a little bit, just previous to this, Jesus had been teaching about divorce, and he also blessed the little children, and he also talked to the rich young ruler. And those experiences made an impression on his disciples. And now he's telling them about sufferings that the Messiah will have to undergo. Is this news to the disciples?
I think it is.
It appears to be, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah, because they know the scriptures. They've been going to rabbi school.
Well, not only that.
Well, and Jesus said often,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that he would die and in 3 days rise again. They just, somehow they didn't comprehend or didn't listen, or how many times do we hear but not listen,
In one ear.
right?
Yep. And this, at least 2 times it's recorded in Mark previous to this, he said the same thing. Okay? So anyway, so here he is. They're going up to Jerusalem. Now this is an interesting thing, because when we look at a map, let's look at the map again here. He's coming from this area, going down to
Through
Jerusalem.
some areas.
Wait a minute.
again.
Wait a minute, going down? No, we're not going down. We're going up, it says. Oh, there's a contradiction in the Bible. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Because they looked at things in elevation, not as maps
Yeah.
like we do. We think of a map as being north is up, south is down. But it's not. So whenever you go to a place that's in higher elevation, you're going up to it. And Jerusalem was, 3,000 feet higher than sea level. So
Wow.
you go up to Jerusalem. And so that's why they're using that term, in case you wondered that. And it's not an unusual thing to go to Jerusalem. Jewish men were required back then to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. For there's at least 3 major festivals that they would go to for. There's more than 3, by the way, more festivals. But there's the festival of the Passover or unleavened bread. There's the festival of the Pentecost time frame. Not like we think of Pentecost.
Yeah, different.
Different. It's the Old Testament. And also the festival of the tabernacle or booths. And there's like several names for that particular festival as well. But these are the 3 times. And so it's not unusual to be doing this. And this trip would have been for the Passover one. And it would have been taken in the spring. But Jesus did not have the festival in mind. He had something else in mind, didn't he? And he had already shared with them what it was. In Mark 8:31 and 9:30. Did I give that to somebody? I think I might have.
I can read it from my Bible.
No, just a moment. Hold on. I didn't. I have it ready here in my Bible. That's what it was.
Ooh, look
Ah,
at you.
you want to read more verses? Is that what you're saying?
If you'd like me to.
Oh, go figure. He wants to. Go ahead. Why don't you read for me then? Mark 8:31 through 33.
Mark
Mark 8.
8:31 to 33.
And I'm going to read Mark 9:30 through 32. So, but anyway, you go ahead and read the first one for me.
And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders, and the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed. And after 3 days rise again. And he was stating the matter plainly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning around, and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but on man's."
Pretty clear there, isn't it? Right? And then also in Mark 9:30 through 32, it says, from there they went out and began to go through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know about it. For he was teaching his disciples and telling them, the Son of Man is to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and when he has been killed, he will rise 3 days later. But they did not understand this statement, and they were afraid to ask him. And I think that was the last verse I want to read. So then this part comes. So we see, at least in the chronological part of Mark, and we don't know exactly when all these things happened, but pretty much laid out the way when Mark lays these things out. It's probably chronological in his memory. Well, not his memory, Peter's memory, because he's probably he's relating what Peter experienced, right? So now we come to this one. This is at least what? 1, 2, third time. Third time's a charm, right? But it says that, okay, and this is an interesting thing as well. It says that Jesus was walking on ahead of them, and they were amazed. And those who followed were fearful, it says. So those are interesting statements. Why do you think that was so? Why were they fearful? Well, he had been saying what? These things. So they had at least apprehension about what was going on, might happen to them when he goes to Jerusalem, right?
Was it Thomas who said, "Let's go with him so we can die with him"?
Yeah.
And I don't remember whether it was around this time.
Yeah, I don't remember where that was exactly, but that was the same idea. On his journey to Jerusalem, the Passover, prior to him being executed on the cross.
I think the curiosity was really great with them.
Mm-hmm.
That I believe that probably had a lot to do with why they would continue to follow him, at least in behind, because Jesus wasn't playing around. He was going to go do business, and he didn't play that violin song, "Will you follow me?" No. He went on to do what his father told him to do.
Mm-hmm. By the way, this is not unusual for a rabbi to lead those who are following him. And in those days, the rabbi would stand at the head, and everybody would follow in line, probably in some sort of pecking order. I don't know, but he would lead the way. But they knew from what he'd said that nothing but bad stuff was going to happen when he go to Jerusalem this time, right?
Right.
So
he was clear.
So that kind of explains part of this about them being fearful, right? And being amazed because he was bringing them right into the teeth of the opposition. Is that what you get from that, Matthew? I thought I'd ask you since you're in here.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
He's reading something else.
I was listening with half my attention. Is like,
That's okay. But he said something to them. He said, "Behold." Now, what does "behold" mean when you see that in the Bible?
Pay attention.
This is important. Now,
Hark.
some pastors will go like this. You guys listening? Or something like that. They're getting your attention.
Military style.
Yeah. That's not just only military, by the way. I heard that in high school.
Yeah.
We had a teacher would do this whenever he was teaching stuff, and there was something that could be on a test. He'd go like this, and you go.
Write this one down.
Write that down.
Sometimes I think just to see if they were awake. But anyway, it says, "Behold, we are going to Jerusalem." What's going to happen there? We're going to have a time at the festival and great time? No. What's going to happen there?
Death.
Death.
Death on a cross.
Yes. You can see why they're fearful then. He's already said this before, right? And this is a little bit different, this particular one. He says it's going to be delivered to the chief priests and scribes. Okay, I remember that, yeah. And they will condemn him to death and then do something else. Hand him over to the Gentiles. Now, what was a Gentile?
A non-Jew.
A non-Jew. In this particular case, the correct assumption would be the authoritative Gentile, which would be a Roman authority of some sort. So we can attach to this the fact that he was referring to probably the Romans who are in charge, right? So in this particular case, that would be that Gentile, would be a Roman authority. And they will do what to him?
They will spit on him and kill him.
Mock him,
Mock him.
scourge him. Now, okay, the mocking part for a Jewish rabbi, that's a terrible thing. What a disrespectful thing to do to a teacher, right? A Jewish teacher would be to mock them. Spit on them. That's kind of like an ultimate type of insult when somebody spits on you. I've seen some news reports and stuff where people are protesting different things and other people come up and spit on them. It's a disgusting thing. If you don't disagree with them, if you don't agree with them, That's fine, but don't do that. What's wrong with people? It's like a terrible thing to do to somebody. But then, not only that, they scourge him. What is a scourge? What does that mean?
It's like they're mocking him in a physical way,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they don't let up either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just continue. It just continues on.
And the scourge was something that was very physical.
Yeah.
It was a whipping. It was a beating. But not just somebody hitting you with their fists necessarily. Not somebody hitting you with maybe a club or something like that. But they had a device they would scourge with. You've heard of the cat of nine tails, maybe,
Yeah.
before? And the Romans used this. There's another term for it. Flagell.
Flogging.
Well, no, I don't remember for sure.
I can't remember. Anyway, but they would use this in their beatings, and they would strike the person 39 times, not 40, just one less than 40.
Flagrum.
What's that?
Flagrum or flagrum.
Yes.
Flagrum.
Yes, and it means to tear out. And they would have these whips, and on the end of the leather strips would be tied pieces of bone, metal, jagged rock.
Stone.
I don't know if they had glass per se there or not, but something like that. And they would,
Clay.
yeah, but it'd be something hard they could hit and then pull it, and what would happen, it would stick and then pull out flesh. It's horrible. Many people would die just from this flogging. But this is what he said would happen to him. They're going to scourge him, and then they're going to kill him. Now, and so the Gentile authority is the Romans, and if they're going to kill him, what does that mean to everyone at that time? It means what? Death on the cross, right? It means you will die. He's saying, I am going to be put on a cross and killed, and which is the ultimate horrible death in those days. They would put them up on these crosses, and it was designed to get maximum pain for maximum time. And you would stay up there until you died normally.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, he didn't leave you up there as long as they could, so that the birds of the air would even pick on your body. And sometimes they do that before you're actually all dead. But it's a horrible, horrible way to die. So when you say this is the visual that comes to their minds, you know. And so this is not a good thing, is it? Now also, they're putting him on this cross. What's the cross made out of?
Usually it's made out of wood.
Wood.
Tree.
Yeah. Wood. Tree. So this has an added implication, because in Deuteronomy 21 and also in Galatians 3:13, which quotes it, I believe it was considered a special kind of curse under Jewish law if you were killed and hung on a tree of any kind, those kind of things. So it would symbolize the curse of sin. And Jesus was accepting this for all humanity because he had no sin in him. And he's telling them all this as they're walking towards the place where this is going to happen. So can you put yourself in there? Are you scared, perhaps? Why do you think it was necessary for Jesus to continually remind his disciples about his death and resurrection?
Because they weren't believing him.
They weren't believing it. They didn't understand it either, right?
Yep.
And it's like all these things where you suddenly realize something, even though somebody's been telling you, and it suddenly like hits you. Oh, that's what that was meaning. Because they did not understand this. Remember when he was crucified? They thought it was all over. They were hiding because it was done. We were going to get killed next.
Yeah.
They had forgotten the last part. And 3 days later, he will rise again.
What do you suppose he means by rise again? So he spoke often in parables and riddles, right? So a lot of them were probably like, it's just some type of parable, riddle.
Maybe it
because
is.
they couldn't conceive that their Messiah would have this happen to him.
But they saw him healing people,
Yeah.
even from the dead.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, he's dead, so how can he heal himself?
Yeah, yeah.
See, that's their logic probably they were thinking, right?
And there's also an element of, we've all had this, right? Where you read a Bible verse, you've read it for 20 years,
Yes.
you read it, and then suddenly it hits you. And you're like, oh, how did I miss this?
Now that makes sense.
Yeah. So he's just quoting Bible verses to them, right?
It's called a V8 moment. For those of you younger
Old
folks,
commercial.
you're going to say, what's a V8 moment? It's when you say, I could have had a V8. It's an old commercial. Anyway, so the disciples' expectation of Messiah was what? What would be Messiah?
Ruler,
Ruler,
conqueror,
conqueror,
Leader.
spiritual leader.
savior,
Yeah.
politically.
Some of the rabbis were not too sure that it would be one person. They thought it might be two people. When Messiah comes, one will be the military David type of ruler. The other one would be more like Elijah or Isaiah, not Isaiah, but a powerful prophet type religious leader. They couldn't comprehend the kind of Messiah that Jesus was, or the kind that Isaiah said that Messiah would be, because those scriptures, even though they knew him, they were foreign to them in a way. Is that fun? You find how that is?
It wasn't revealed to them either. They had no revelation behind what they have read. They just go to the synagogues, and the rabbis would just read the scripture. And
Yeah.
they memorized it good, but what it actually meant, they had
Right.
no what it meant.
The learning or listening is an active thing. I've learned this in many different courses I've taken in my Air Force career. You have to actively listen. And to do that, you have to give feedback. So the person telling you whatever it is, the communicating thing, knows that you understand. I don't think this was, in most cases, the case. In most cases, they heard this stuff, it hit their ears, it didn't penetrate into their subconscious to see what it really meant. So the disciples' expectation of the Messiah did not meet the image of the suffering servant that Isaiah told sacrifice. How can we live out Jesus' example before the world? Sort of a rhetorical question at this point. But it's something maybe we don't think about as much as maybe we should. Just like the disciples didn't think about some of these things, right? So let's look at the next point here. The number 2 would be request made. And for these next 6 verses, I want you to note the misguided request made to Jesus. So Jesus has told this to them, and you would think this would be their thought process. Hey, let's talk about this. Let's see what he means by these things. But it doesn't go that direction. Who's got number 2?
I have number
I
2.
want you to read 2A
Thank
first.
you. I was just going to
And then we're going to hit 2B after that. Okay, so for these first ones, the first half, note the misguided request made to Jesus. Go ahead.
Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, approached him and asked, "Teacher, we want you to do something for us if we ask you." I was thinking, the gall of these. But anyway, "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They answered him, "Allow us to sit at your right and your left in your glory." But Jesus said to them, You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup I drink?
Okay, stop right there.
Oh, wait.
We don't want to go. That's the second.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I went on.
I even
I'm
drew
sorry.
a line for you.
Sorry. I wasn't reading out
It's
the
great
paper.
stuff. It's great
Yes.
stuff. Okay. But
Sorry.
no, you're fine. So who are James and John?
Sons of Zebedee.
So Zebedee is their father. They're also known as something else.
Thunders.
Thunder.
Sons of thunder, yes. So and who was it that Jesus would often take to special events?
James and John.
Those 2 plus Peter usually.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. These are the ones that are asking this question, right? If you were to look up a parallel verse, I think it's Luke 22, 24 through 27. I didn't write that one down, but he also gives this verse as well. And I think Matthew 20 gives us some information there too on a parallel. It's on page 2 of my handout. It says parallel verses at the bottom. Don't worry about looking it up or anything. I'm just pointing it out to you. But they asked this question. Well, in one of the other gospel accounts, I think it's Matthew, is actually apparently Mama Zebedee. No, that's not her name. I know, but the mother.
Right, it was the mother
Right.
of
So
James and John.
she was.
Take my sons.
Hey, Jesus! You know how important they are to you. Can you put them in a good position in your kingdom? So here, Jesus is going up, and he's going to be crucified. Okay, and it's like it went right over their heads because they're arguing about who's going to be the best. Well, James and John, we are obviously. We've been in right and left hand positions. Those are positions of power, folks. When you think about a king, whoever is your right-hand man or your left-hand man, those you trust because they're protecting you, they're watching out for you. They're the most. They have the most power, right? What was another example of that? let's see, in the Old Testament, King Pharaoh made somebody into a right-hand person. I don't know if they use that exact term or not. But who was that person? Remember him? Joseph, right. Joseph was very important to King Pharaoh. He put him in charge of all kinds of stuff, right? This is sort of a similar kind of thing, if you think about that.
Daniel got similar blessings.
Daniel was the other one I was going to say.
Yeah.
Very good. Daniel was put by Nebuchadnezzar in a position because Nebuchadnezzar recognized the fact that he had some special abilities from his God. And boy, he wanted that powerful person next to him.
And we still use that term today.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the right-hand man, that you're the go-to guy.
Yep. You know who you talk to? You talk to that person there. He'll get it for you because he's the right-hand man to that other person. Exactly. But they failed to fully grasp what Jesus was telling, right? And their request, would you say it was an appropriate or inappropriate request? I like that little whimpering sound you just made.
Yeah.
Like the gall of them.
Yes!
You know, I mean...
Yeah, back in my junior high days, there'd be two phrases kind of phrase, two corrections. One for the students would be, A, that's rather off topic. B, that's really inappropriate.
Yeah.
Those would be like the two ways I'd answer to my junior hires if they were to pull a stunt like that.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it says in the notes here for the Bible commentary. It says, this request was incredibly inappropriate. Incredibly inappropriate. First, their desire for Jesus to grant whatever we ask reveals a lack of discernment related to Jesus' ministry and purpose. His mission was not to grant their wishes.
Aww.
He wasn't the genie that would pop out of the box, grant the wish, and go away and not bother anymore. Sometimes we treat God like that, don't we?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you ever get the feeling that Christ just shook his head and just, I mean...
There's times when he would sigh deeply.
Yes.
And I would think he must be thinking of a similar situation,
Granted, we have hindsight and know what we know, right?
Yeah.
But still,
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost like, and I think this way too, with the Israelites, I mean, their whole lives were like this, up and down, up and down. Now, granted, we benefit from that today, like we benefit from the question from James and John, right? Because, once again, do we think of Christ as
we fall into
genie?
that. Yeah, we fall into that trap, don't we?
Yeah.
You were going to say, Matthew?
There's teaching Jesus gives about asking questions of him and of God, and he actually he encourages it, right?
Yeah.
He says ask, you will receive, seek.
That's what followers did of the rabbi.
Right, and you go back to later on his arrest night in John 14, it says, if you ask anything in my name, I'll do it.
Yes.
And so, if that wasn't the first time he presented that type of a teaching, you can imagine these guys are like, hey, wait, nobody else has asked for this yet. Mm-hmm. Let's get, hey, Mom, what do you think? Well, I'm going to ask him now. Mom, don't. Okay.
Isn't it kind of like shotgun?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I wonder if that's kind of what was going on. It's like, nobody's asked this yet.
Yeah, it could be. Second, I said the first one. Second, their attempts to claim prime seats in the kingdom showed an unhealthy ambition bordering on arrogance.
I'm sure they'd be benevolent, though.
So remember, we're talking about serving here. And would you say this would be a servant attitude that they're displaying here? Or maybe would we say the exact opposite?
Yeah, it's a me first.
Huh?
It's a me
Yes.
first.
Yes.
First,
So it's not what Jesus is trying to promote here. He's telling them what he has to do. He has to go through all this. And this is an act of service that Christ will be doing. And what are they doing? Are they following up with what he said? Oh, that I understand that. How can we be of service in your kingdom? No, it's me. It must have really, like you said, amazed Jesus because, and I could see him going, well,
But you notice also that they want the glory because it says
Yeah, they're jumping over the suffering.
yes. So if they would have stopped at, we want to be at your right hand and your left hand. Okay, I'll meet you at the cross.
yeah,
Right.
that wasn't what they were thinking. You're right about that. Anyway, so the request was made from selfish motives and spiritual ignorance, and that's exactly what it was, right?
And just to jump into that though, they jump right to the glory, right? So Jesus highlights the glory in verse 34, and he will rise again. So let's imagine they have a general conception of what that means. Like, oh, it must be rising up to glory. Okay, hey, well, we just want to jump right there.
Yes.
Suffering and death, whatever. But let's talk about that rising to glory part.
And just skip right over that.
Yeah, we're gonna jump over this, can't we? Which a lot of Christians, I mean, we have to fight
No,
in our
we
own,
don't do that, do we?
in our own heart about the prosperity gospel, right? I mean, the American doesn't, and it's not just financial prosperity. Family prosperity is a gospel. Kind of a false gospel spawned in like Baptist circles. It's like, oh, you follow God, and your life's going to be perfect, your family's going to be perfect, and you're going to have lots of money. You're not going to get sick. You're not going to. So we want to jump over the suffering and go to the. We just want to sit in glory with you,
Yes.
Jesus. It's like, well,
What frustrates me in this prosperity gospel is people have the word right there.
Yeah.
But they skip right past.
Yeah, they,
you selectively.
Our mind is like a filter. It filters out those things we don't want, and we only see sometimes the things we do want. And it's you ever heard of something called buyer's remorse?
Yes.
You
Oh,
see
yes.
that see that car, let's say. Oh, that's great, that's car. I love it. You just look right past the fact that it costs a whole lot to operate or to insure, and you get in it and you realize all this stuff later. It's, oh, I didn't even think of that. And I think our minds do that.
Yeah.
It filters. Anyway, going on. Jesus did not shame James and John, but he reminded them that following him what it required. So the same way it says God doesn't shame us for our own questions and doubts. Somebody mentioned this earlier. He wants us to ask those questions. He wants us to express ourselves, right? He invites us to speak our minds while reminding us what it means to be a disciple. And they were still learning this. So we want to think also of practical ways to make sure our requests to God are servant-centered rather than self-centered. And that's a real important point. Let's look at the last half of that part that Tina had. For these last 3 verses, I want you to note the future sacrifices that the disciples will have to make. Go ahead.
but Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" "We are able," they told him. Jesus said to
No
them,
problem.
"You will drink the cup I drink, and you will be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with.
And then verse 4.
But to sit at my right or left hand is not mine to give. Instead, it is for those it has been prepared for."
So, in these particular verses here, it uses some terms which are interesting. When you hear the term cup, we think of, I want a cup of iced tea, sure. But this is a metaphor. And what's a metaphor? Just kidding.
Something for something else.
It's a Jewish metaphor. It can describe 2 things. It can describe joy, the cup of blessings, for instance, or drinking that cup of judgment. It's a divine judgment, depending on the context. So in this context, of course, we're talking judgment here. Jesus would drink from the cup to pay the cost of humanity's sins. We see that in Mark 14:36 as well. So he's already told the disciples that what this cup would entail. It would entail what? What would be some of the things in this cup? Well, in those verses we talked about in verse 34. Mocking, insults in other words, being spit upon, being beaten, and being killed. Wow. That's a lot for my cup. I don't know about you. That would be pretty
And we
bad.
still use that phrase today. My cup is half full.
Yeah.
Or
We use
my
it
cup
in
is
various ways.
overflowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, so it is a cup that would cost him everything. He would die. And he drank from it so others would not have to. James and John, along with the disciples, would drink from their own cups of suffering as well. But their suffering would be very different from what Jesus would endure. Now, what about the other term? We saw cup. What was another term that was kind of interesting to see there pop up?
Baptized with
the
baptism.
Baptized. Well, that sounds not too bad. I mean, baptism is a joyful time in our church. We see a baptism, right? Well, that's not exactly the term we're talking here in the same usage here. Baptism in the Old Testament was a picture of being overcome by tragedy, like a flood. Okay, what overcome
Baptized
you?
by fire.
Yes, it's an apt description of what Jesus was about to face on the cross. He was become overcome, right? And the only innocent man who ever lived now was preparing to accept the full wrath of God on behalf of each one of us.
I always wondered what that meant, the baptism. I said, well, I know it's not talking about a literal baptism. It's got to be, but thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. And in a way, we get a taste of that in our picture of baptism in our church.
Yeah.
Because you do what? You die. when you go into the water.
Yes.
Right.
You die to your old self, and then you're
Rise.
raised up by God out of that death.
Mhm.
You know, so it's a beautiful picture of the second part.
Yeah.
But the first part is you dying.
Yeah.
So we sometimes skip past that and go right to the joyful part. But in the imagery they were using here, it was that kind of thing where you're being overcome by this flood. It's just, and there's nothing you do to stop it. And it's a flood that will destroy and not be a good thing. Are floods a good thing? Not necessarily, are they? So, excuse me. So that's just something they'd have to undergo, I should say. And what's interesting in here is, we're talking about James and John, right?
Yes.
You know what the first disciple to die as a martyr was?
The Apostle Peter.
James.
Was it? Oh, that's right.
James died. Who was the last one that we know of that died? John. Kind of interesting. It's just interesting how that turned out. You know, John was one of the last ones to die from what we know of from the accounts and stuff. So, but yeah, James would die as a martyr, and John either died of old age or was beheaded. There's a various understandings of that.
But he was elderly.
Oh yes, he was elderly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
But anyway, and remember the one that Peter asked about, well, what about that one over there? He was pointing at John.
Yeah.
And then Jesus, well, if I want him to live until I come again, what is it to you? So that's why everybody realized, well, John's going to outlive everybody. You know, that was the or maybe never die even. There was that kind of thing. But that's not what Jesus meant. He meant, Peter, don't worry about him. You worry about me and you and your situation here. So anyway, so that's the term, what that term comes from. But to sit on my right or my left, it is not mine to give. That's an interesting statement. But it's for those for whom it has been prepared. So whose right is it to give?
Say the Father.
His
Thanks
Father's
you.
Who's got number 3? Number
Uh-oh.
3.
No, nope.
Steve
Oh, Steve does.
Steve does.
I thought
Matthew has.
Matthew had it. He
Matthew
bugged out
has
of me.
number 5.
All right, we're 2023, Matthew. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father.
So this gives it a little more clarity, right?
Yeah.
So who have they been prepared by?
The
The
Father.
Father. So it doesn't mean that Jesus is any less God, by the way. But within the Godhead, there is a structure. And the structure is God the Father. And remember, Jesus did what when he came to earth? He was emptied of a lot of the things, the foreknowledge of certain things and stuff. So, and that was voluntarily done by him. So that part is the Father's responsibility, is what he's saying. I can't do that. You're asking me to do something which you shouldn't ask me about. And I'm not the person to ask anyway, because God the Father will determine that, which puts a whole new spin on it for them. Anyway, so Jesus made it clear that they had a lot to learn, right? So have we learned everything so far? No. Do we have a lot to learn sometimes? I think we do.
Always.
I do. I learn something new every day. I really do. I mean, it's amazing. And every time I go through a lesson like this, I learn more things about God and about what he wants in my life, and it just amazes me. So, but anyway, so we see that God is the one God the Father determines it, and that's what Jesus is trying to tell them there. He made it clear that they had a lot to learn. Jesus used this tense moment as an opportunity to teach them more about what being a true leader means in his paradigm. Now, that paradigm is a viewpoint, the way you look at things. So don't be put off by that $10 word. But that's all that means there. Let's look at the next. See, I didn't skip any verses here, did I? Oh, yeah, I talked about that already. Good. Let's look at the last point here. Roles reversed. Mark 10, 41 through 45. And in these last 5 verses, I want you to notice Jesus' new order that the disciples will be following. Who's got number 4?
I do.
Right.
Hearing this, the 10 began to feel indignant.
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 What's wrong with you?
Under James and John, calling themselves himself, Jesus said to them, you know that those who are organized as rulers of the Gentiles lord over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. But this is not this way among you. But whoever wishes to become great amongst you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be among you shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many.
So this is the servant picture, and we see this and we wonder, wow, this doesn't even make sense. If you want to be great, you got to be least. What does that mean? Is this some sort of puzzle? That's what he's trying. So he's trying to get them to rethink what it means. They think it means I'm at your right hand, I'm at your left hand. We're going to rule, and people are going to serve us. But no, the Son of Man is going to be serving you. You have to also serve others as well. And that's the paradigm shift. You remember that term too, that phrase? That's what that means. Instead of looking at it like over here, you're looking at it this way. The better viewpoint. So James and John, they were basically said, no, that's not mine to give, right? And then the other 10 who had been listening to all this said, whoa, wait a minute. What are we, chopped liver? Or they're indignant, it says. They were probably a little irritated with James and John, would say it mildly, right? But Jesus realizes he needed to right away settle this for him and tell him what it really means, what's going on here. And he uses the example of the Gentiles, and we know Roman rule was very strict, right? And you served Rome. He says, that's what you see around you, right? That's not the way it should be among you. He says, whoever wishes to become great will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first will be the last or the slave. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is the key. And I wish I had a whole lot more time to read this, to talk about this. How would you react to someone else asking for the best seat at the table?
Get behind me.
Hey, that's my spot.
I was here
Depends
first.
on who you're asking.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Asking.
And that's kind of what's going on here, right? And so Jesus is trying to set in their mind this new definition of what leadership really means. One of the best leaders I've ever had was my boss at the avionics shop in Portland there, and Lauren. And he was great, but he would do things for us all the time, and he was the one that's supposed to tell us what to do. Yeah, he was doing things for us all the time, and I realized, and I tried to model myself after him. He as far as a leader goes, he did the best I ever had. I've had several good bosses and some bad ones. And I've learned from all of them what not to be, in some cases, what to be. And he was one of the ones that I wanted to emulate in anything I did. And I tried hard to do that. And I think I was fairly successful in most cases. There's been a few people that I didn't get along with. I don't know why. I think it was their problem at that point. But whatever, regardless, we need to take that kind of a role in our life as Christians especially, and in generally, because our life in general should reflect what's in our heart. And as Christians, you should reflect Christ, right? Should. So our key verse is, like I said, verse 45. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And says one of the things that Jesus said would happen to him in verse 3. We talked about that already. I don't want to go backwards. I forgot about that one. We talked about that already, and this is what's going to happen, right? Jesus' emphasis on service, it sets Christianity apart from many other worldviews in these verses here. Who's got number 5?
I do.
Okay, could you read number 5 for us?
John chapter 13, verses 3 to 5. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come forth from God and was going back to God, got up from the supper, and laid aside his garments, and taking a towel, he girded himself. And going on to that, he washes their feet. Verses 12 to 15 continue. So when he had washed their feet, and taken his garments, and reclined at the table again, he said to them, Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for I am. If then the Lord and the teacher washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you also should do as I did to you.
So what is he saying here in these verses? We should all wash feet, right?
We should all serve.
There you go. It's a principle he's teaching here, right?
I'm
He's,
not
he's,
opposed to football
he- he's not he's not setting up a new sacrament. Some denominations will teach that. Well, we're foot washing Baptists. What's wrong with you? You don't wash feet. No, that was an example. It wasn't said. Do
It
this
is
in remembrance
optional
of me.
today.
It's an optional thing. It doesn't say you can't either.
Again, we might have one from Easter season. I'm just
Right,
warning you
right,
guys.
right. And it's a teaching. It's a teaching point at that thing.
Yes.
It's not a ritual, though. Is what I'm getting at. And so the lowest job in the house in a household was usually given to a servant girl, many times not Jewish, and they would wash the feet of the people who came in off those dusty, dirty roads. They'd take their sandals off if they had sandals. Some didn't, and they'd wash those horrible, dirty feet off so they'd be prepared for supper. When they came to this is about the Last Supper, by the way. When they came to do that, no one stepped forward to do it. No one stepped forward. There was no servants there. There were just the 12 there. And so
Just a bit of a secret of meaning.
Jesus did it. He showed them by example. This is what servant heart is. Servant heart does.
Judas was still there at this time.
Yes, he washed the feet of the one who would betray him. That's exactly right. So that shows you how deep his service was. And that's, he says, you should do also. Right? And now, this was not in the actual lesson, these verses, but I thought it was very appropriate, so I included it. So let's look at how we can end this study today. These 3 points. Christians should humbly recognize the necessity of the death and resurrection of Jesus. 2, Christians must examine their motives for serving others. Are you doing it for the right reasons? Or are you doing it to maybe get ahead in your organization or something? You know, are you doing it because it's part of your life as
That's
a Christian?
important there.
And last, Christians demonstrate Christian character by serving others. So these things are difficult to do. They're not easy, are they? But I want you to think about maybe what might be a specific way that you can maybe humble yourself and be a servant this week. Just as you think about this particular study, is there ways maybe you can? And God can tender your heart in this area, because he's tendered mine many times. You know, because pride is very, very hard to get over. And you think, well, I'm right though. I know I'm right. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Oh, but Lord, you know I'm right. I have a very righteous strain in me sometimes. Stubborn too. But you know, oh, I know. Okay, I will listen to what this guy says and I'll take it to heart. I had to do that one time. Oh, it was really fun. But we need to do that. We need to tender our hearts, right? And we're going to close in prayer now, but remember this week to try to find those times you can do that, right? Dearly Father, I just thank you for all you've done for us. Thank you for this study, Lord, on how Jesus taught what it really meant to serve others. And Lord, the disciples didn't quite get it until later on, and then they remembered these things, Lord. And help us to remember these things as well. I just pray that you help us to look hard at our hearts, Lord, and see in what way we can tender them to you, and not in the human ways of doing things, Lord. Thank you so much for in your Son's name we pray. Amen. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. And stand by next week for another lesson. In the next hour, by the way, Matthew, our pastor, will be bringing us a message, so please stand by the same YouTube channel. Thank you for being with us. This is Grace Baptist Church, the Adult One Bible Study. We'll see you later.